we can start off. So yeah, welcome to the Hackalong again. And like I said, we're doing a recap. Ospi, do you want to share, since the first time you presented on REA, do you want to share what's been up? Maybe even, yeah, what's been up and even where you think things are going.
Well, you're testing me. When was the first time I even presented? God, how long ago was that?
Not too long. I think it was just a couple, like we've been doing this just for a couple months, so it's not too long.
Yeah, I mean, I think the core project of HoloREA is fairly stable in the current version of Holochain and happy where it is. And like there are some noteworthy missing features, but I'm happy with them being missing until we get to RSM, because it's just the more parts of the system I touch, the more things there are to re-architect. And so yeah, that's been pretty constant, and it's been more movement in applications building on us around the edges and people getting excited and starting to implement things. So Basyn, I guess, is the most obvious one of those for people that have been coming to these calls, and Seedshare being the other one that's been pretty in-depth and interesting conversations. But yeah, most of our work at the moment feels kind of UI level, doesn't it? And it also kind of feels like, after talking about Hilo so much the other week, like we've got about 5 different projects that are all building essentially the same marketplace with a different theme and presentation, right? So it's been really interesting, just kind of the nod to how central those kinds of matching services are in these new spaces. And yeah, I think I'm kind of coming up against a moment of reckoning with the tool chain that I'm experimenting with as well on the front end side, because you know, it's been a little bit disheartening, to be honest, because it's like every project I start, I spend so much time just making form controls, and I couldn't count how many dozens, hundreds of times in my career I've had to make form controls, and it's just like, really, I'm doing this again.
What do you mean by tool chains, though?
Well, this is all the Svelte UI framework stuff, and you know, like I've already built all the UI kit in React for doing these kinds of form inputs and things, but we were hoping to be able to have broader adoption by having a more general purpose framework. And I've been kind of happy with the way Svelte has been performing. It does feel a little bit premature, like there's some edge cases to work around with it. But it's just kind of like, oh God, I'm making more forms. And so I want to kind of, once I'm done with the ones I'm working on at the moment, do a conversion to React and get all of that tooling built up so that I've at least proven that Svelte can compile to React. Otherwise, I'm thinking, you know, maybe it's time to just go back to React and stay where it's safe and iterate more rapidly, rather than investigating yet another new front-end technology and wondering what the benefits are going to be over the long term. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with things at the moment in the brief sense. Does that answer your question fully, or is there more little specifics you want to talk through?
Maybe just where you're heading, like, do you, in terms of the refactor, changing things around for the next version of Holochain? Is there, like, yeah, what do you think? Is there a lot that you're going to have to re-architect?
No, I don't think so. Because I did the thing, I think it might have been Sam that was talking about it the other week. Someone was anyway, about like
Philip was.
Philip was, yeah, like write some little adapter stuff around the system so that you just have to change your adapter code and not everything. And I think I've dealt with that pretty well. So there's only really one library that has to change to make it work with the new framework.
Really?
Yeah, pretty much.
Isn't there also some more like deep, like from what I understand, like bridging is going to change pretty significantly as well?
Yeah, but it's, you know, bridging is going to affect like stuff around the edges in terms of how we configure the system, but it's not going to affect all the logic of how it works. And the changes to the HDK are just going to affect the low-level pieces of putting links and entries on the DHT, which I've wrapped up with a bunch of helper methods anyway. So I think it should all be pretty straightforward. The things that kind of go deeper, like capabilities and things, are stuff that I haven't touched yet for that reason.
Yeah, that's what I like. It seemed to me like that's where some of the real changes are. But apparently,
So
like bridging is going to allow us to call the function directly. Like you're not pinging first. You're not sending a message first, and then calling the function once the bridge is established. Like
oh, you don't have to do that. You do just call functions straight through at the moment, really. That was just that weird implementation Guillaume had of like calling into someone else's bridge DNA, I think.
Oh, okay.
That kind of request flow. But standard bridging stuff, it's just, you know, HDK call the name of the bridge, and it's just one method. As to where things are heading, like it'll be fun when RSN comes up, just having the opportunity to tear it all down and rewrite large swathes of it, I think. That always tends to be good for code quality. I'm terrible at asking for things I need, so I'll make a point of doing that. It's I think it's gonna be like the interesting parts of Holochain will be the pieces to build after RSM. And so it's things like managing countersigning of events that are added to the DHT, and managing capabilities for agents, and managing like capabilities for agents to do things on others' behalves, which there might be some need for. Yeah, so having help with someone who's enthusiastic and excited about doing weird stuff with Rust would be really cool for all of that. And the other big body of work is just going to be UI work and experimentation and iteration and building more apps for a while at least. And as we've spoken about a little bit, this idea of running in cycles. So the ultimate goal for me would be if I can play middleman on the second part of that cycle. So the first part being build an app, and then the second part being, okay, now let's genericize the app and make all the components useful to other apps. And if it could line up such that like we help Basyn build an app, and then Shiro wants to come in and start building their app, and I can be in the middle and help adapt Basyn's components to make them generic so Shiro can use them. That sounds like a really helpful place to be. So yeah, if anyone has projects at that kind of level of maturity and wants to talk about that, who is watching this recording, please reach out to me.
Do you think about moving in a direction where your involvement may not be as required? Someone picks up REA, or maybe what you're running are more like your equivalent of dev camps for REA, REA camps as well. And then people just, but even on the UI end, so you're not literally building that out as much.
Yeah. It's kind of that place of like every JavaScript project, you start and you spend 2 weeks fighting with the build system and making it perfect before you kind of feel like it's in a stable place to get other people to contribute. And that's kind of where I'm at with Svelte, and I might persevere, I might give up and go back to React, I'm not sure. Yeah, I want to lay those foundations first, and then that kind of approach does sound like it'd be fun. Like there's no reason that we couldn't kind of recenter or have a separate set of calls that are specific to REA and building that out and building things out on it. Yeah. And it'd be good to have, I mean, I've done my best, but it's always slow work when you have all of the cognitive complexity of a project in your head, trying to convey that to other people so they can help out. But yeah, I really would like this to be as open of a project as possible and have more people coming in to contribute.
Would it become more people contributing once people actually start using it and start building their own apps around it? So people will start using it, and then they'll be like, "Oh, I need to dig down into the REA code and figure this out, and maybe it could work this way or something." And then they can contribute just like regular open source.
Yeah,
Or,
I think that's the organic way that I hope it forms up. But maybe there's also a bit more of a guided version we could do of explicitly sort of saying like, yeah, we're going to set aside some time to iterate HoloREA as a project. Yeah, and I can have a think too about, I know we started talking about roadmaps here, but I can have a think about breaking that down into kind of smaller sub-projects that we could work on as a community maybe.
Yeah, and I think it
because there was a project.
Sorry, go ahead.
Thanks. There was a project that came out of the platform Co-ops now, which is a Tasmanian resource recycling co-op, and they want to build pretty much. They don't. I've told the person that is running it about REA, but they're pretty much doing the same thing as what we've been talking about. But they're not. They're still in the process of working out what they're going to do and who's going to build the app. So they're probably, I don't know for sure, but they're probably like a few months away from building an app. But that could potentially be another project that could use REA.
Yeah, because I think there is, like we were talking earlier, we've been doing these dev camp lights for power users or people who don't have dev skills. And there is, I would say, a bridge into them with REA, like for them to internalize and appreciate the importance of REA. Because I think someone who's a dev kind of jumps into the code and gets it. But there is this massive conversation with entrepreneurs and why. And I think entrepreneurs' motivations are usually different, right? Like it's like doing new kinds of things and doing it at lower costs, possibly than before. And
risk as well. Risk is a big one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think translating REA into that, and I can, as an entrepreneur who's been looking at REA, like for me, I can see like, oh, this is why it makes sense. But a lot of entrepreneurs have not made that jump yet. And I think it'll be nice to build that bridge into why they should be speaking that way. Because again, like I think the real value of REA for me stems from more and more people adopting it, because then you get that, the interoperability and the true benefit of distributed systems. And so I think there's something there.
And you only have to focus on your little bit, don't you? To get all that benefit, you just focus on your little bit, and you just rely on everybody else doing their little bit. And no one has to have the complete picture, but it still gives you that transparency and visibility of all the processes. That's my understanding. And,
no, I think that's exactly
that seems to be what everybody's having these parallel conversations about the same thing. Yeah. Just needs to all to come together.
Yeah, and I think there are some minor trade-offs for an entrepreneur. Like instead of going out and shooting and building things your own way, like you're basically buying into an accounting protocol for a broader spectrum of benefits. And that trade-off, like to articulate it to an entrepreneur, would be important and fun. Like I can think of like why they should be doing it anyway. So yeah, maybe that's a tie-in with, I've been thinking about conversations for neighborhoods, and so all of this could kind of plug into that as well, like because I think neighborhoods would be more conversations with entrepreneurs rather than devs. So let's see. You could see how that evolves.
I encourage you to reach out to Lynn with those sessions as well too. She's very good at talking to entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that is right. I think that is, and I think she might actually have some of these resources other than the Value Flows website out there. So that could be fun. I think with Lynn though, like she presents the case really well for within an organization. But I think with Holochain, there's now that case for like much broader network effects, as it were, as to why one should be thinking value flows. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I think
uh,
just on that, I feel like we've kind of gotten lucky with Basyn and Seedshare and Shiro that there just happens to be these groups that all have inputs and outputs that can work together.
mm,
It's kind of an interesting one to make concrete when someone comes into an ecosystem, like how to do that when there aren't those other entities sitting about that you can point to as practical examples and say, you know, you have possibilities to share resources with this bunch.
mm,
Mm.
mm, yeah. Anything
But yeah,
else
to
on the?
Sam's point,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say my articulation has often been that like I think there is a place to come from where it actually saves entrepreneurs time. It's like you could have your development team design a data model to fit your use case and build it and do all the work, or you could just go, here's this data model that works for all these
Mm,
things, plug it in and learn
mm,
how to deal with that data model.
mm,
Which is, yeah, like there is a big entrepreneurial side to that, to understanding the
mm,
theory and knowing how to work
mm.
within it, right?
Yeah, I think of it in terms of language, right? Like learn to speak REA, and here's the
Mm,
benefits.
mm.
And
Yeah. And so then, you know, the other benefit to articulate is, okay, now you speak REA, so now you can
mm,
build systems that all talk to this same backend. And
mm,
that's the story of like now they're creating networks and they're all integrated. And I guess people can kind of experience that within their own platforms and communities, even prior to engaging with others once they start
mm,
building in this way.
yeah. I was also thinking about it from just an infrastructure cost perspective. Like if a bunch of your users are also on REA, would that lead to a lower storage / computation cost in some way? Because if a user, for example, has the REA suite installed, is there less replication required for each app, or can it actually be
Mm,
designed in that way?
like there is the artifact of more people in a holochain network means that each individual has to carry less data.
No, no, more from like, let's say if the personas, the basic identity infrastructure provided by Holochain, right? Like the fact that it can be assumed that a user has that. Each app has to think less about creating profile, identity related stuff. And so that basically means the stack for each app is a lot lighter. And so storage and computation costs drop. And so I think from just a pure monetary business lens, like if REA starts moving in that direction, like let's say user installs the REA suite and can now access 50 different communities or apps, because they have that basic infrastructure, like that could be a very tangible business case as well for apps, because I think it'll significantly shrink down their computation costs or storage costs for sure.
Also the dev cost, right?
Yeah, dev costs for sure.
Yeah.
But I think the way POSP is architected right now is, there's no like REA still exists as separate modules within each app. Possibly correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm saying is it could exist also as one shared app for many other apps. But I'm not sure. Like I don't know how much re-architecting that would involve. Because I've been thinking about that for the reputation vault for sure. Like I think there's some reputational stuff that we could be, building a shared infrastructure.
I don't think it's any difference technically. It's just a case of how you deploy those networks. Yeah, I haven't thought about those kinds of use cases before, and I struggle to find examples. But are we talking like there's a region and everyone's doing their own little economic things, but someone decides we should have a shared ledger for the whole region and people start
No,
replicating data into there?
I think it's more like, let's take mutual credit as an example, right? Like we spoke about, a mutual credit example in REA would look like some basic foundational stuff. And then you kind of spin variants of it for different apps. Like, maybe one app has demurrage, and so there's negative interest rates. Another one has positive interest rates. Another one, there's variants of it in different communities. Could there be like some shared infrastructure that a user just carries across apps, which doesn't require replication? Or is that not the case? I haven't thought it through for REA, that's why I don't know. Would that be the case? No.
I'm still not quite sure what you mean.
The equivalent of the Personas app, right? I don't know. Is it called Personas? Yeah. If I have my profile picture in my Personas app, I don't need to replicate it in each app individually.
Actually, it does replicate.
Does it?
Yeah, because, I think in the broad sense, these things they don't tend to reduce your data load more so much as increase it, because in any time you're present in a space that you're not kind of sovereign in, then you usually want to shadow the data in your own space so that you have copies of it. Like that tends to be the way it flows, I think.
Wouldn't it be more efficient to just bridge into the Personas app every time?
Yeah, it would, but you're talking about your Personas app on your machine. So in order for me to get your profile data, I have to request that the app that's hosting us asks you for your persona data that then I get a copy of in mine, so that I've got it to identify you. So I'm never just reading it from you in perpetuity. It's like I'm asking you for it, and then I've got a copy, and whenever you update it, it syncs it to me.
Yeah, like it does. The data does flow to you as the user.
Yeah.
But I'm comparing it to the current scheme of things where my profile picture currently exists in, 15 different apps that I'm using. And then the identity infrastructure that they're building in each one of these apps as compared to like the identity infrastructure that I just exposed to each app. Would that not reduce the data load? Because honestly, like that's to me how agent centricity makes sense, right? Like even from just a cost perspective, like the fact that costs won't completely balloon out of control.
Yeah, it doesn't lessen the data load, but it lessens.
Because I get what you're saying. Like it basically, like my profile pic basically sits on every user who's viewed me or interacted with me now.
Yeah. So it's at the edges rather than provider kind of thing, and it's the weight of the identity infrastructure around it that is not being replicated rather than the data.
So technically, like if you are querying me in one chat app and also querying me in a social media app, like it should, like you don't need to pull out replications of that data, like you're accessing.
No, that is the same data because it's all your key. Yeah, so there's like less duplication of the data between services, but more duplication of the data between peers is kind of what ends up happening. So like your data, you don't have 5 copies of SID on 5 different service providers, but there are 500 different copies of SID amongst all the people that know SID kind of thing.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So, which is why I think like the neighborhoods model starts making economic monetary sense as well, because if you're interacting with the same people across networks, like your costs should therefore drop. And so that's why I'm just thinking about like an equivalent for REA and how shared infrastructure can drop some of those costs. But sorry, Michael, you were saying something?
Oh, just wouldn't it only drop in relation to like if we have a massive proliferation of services, doing it this way would have lower costs in relation to doing it in this kind of like 5 SIDs on 5 different services. Instead, we can have run more services and not have to do as much replication each time we add a service. Does that make sense? Like, if okay. I guess I'm wondering if there might not be that significant of a difference for a somewhat small number of total services, but if we are running a massive amount, maybe there's a cost savings in relation.
I actually feel like it's kind of, I do see the monetary savings there, but it's much more about a time effort savings to me, like for just Sid to be his own source of truth and not have to set up 5 profiles. And that's kind of the main savings I see in REA networks, like the stuff between Basyn and Shiro. It's like you could have another network plugged in that's managing all of your household finances. And then if you go onto the Basyn app and use their marketplace to trade some of your compost into their system or buy some biofertilizer back, that's all you do. And your interaction with their marketplace automatically updates the ledger for your household expenses. So that's kind of a bigger saving for me, is just like data that all flows together and you only do it once and things happen automatically from there because you're sort of in charge of all of those flows of information there.
Yeah. So human time and like dev time and cognitive savings, perhaps.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, but I actually think it does start making monetary sense as well when you're interacting with mostly the same people across networks, or at least for personas. And so I just brought this up for like, what could that equivalent look like for REA? Like, do we have to spin everything? Like, does every REA module have to be replicated in every app that I own? Yeah, that's probably the best way to frame it. Can I not have a shared set of REA infrastructure that gets used in my 50 different apps?
Yeah, sure.
What would that be though?
Yeah, I was talking to Art about this on the RSM call yesterday. And it all works out fine because you can dynamically add and remove DNAs and apps from app bundles. And you can have a DNA in more than one app bundle. So with those 2 constraints being the case, I think it all works out, because then say you have your household expenses as an REA network, that means that you can bridge that network into every place that needs to interact with your finances. And then we're talking about more kind
That's
of
how it stacks up. Yeah.
savings.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. I can imagine that.
Can I just confirm with you, Posby, if that bridging you were just talking about, bridging to a new REA network, is that done by the application or by the user?
By the user, yeah. Like there's a couple of things. HoloChain, they have this manifest file that you can install basically that tells which source DNAs and apps to deploy into someone's conductor. So there's that kind of developer dictated format that would be the starting point. But I think after that, you can kind of click into your conductor and fiddle around with things yourself and change what's in there.
But Sam, like they would have the calling app would have to decide that information is needed for them, right? Like let's say I'm the local government and I want to know what property you bought or some, what payments you made. I have to request each user to consent and let me bridge into that information.
Right. So it has the ability for the user to bridge into new networks has to be facilitated by the application, but it's potentially possible for it to
Yeah.
It's not like you build an app that has these networks and that's it. You build an app that potentially starts with network A and B, but then allows the user to add network C.
Yeah.
I guess that brings us to the age-old question of bridging, right, and concerns around it. If I am an external app trying to bridge into your personal dealings with someone else, like how can I be sure of that validation? Like I'm trusting, because I don't have access to warrants or validation receipts. And so, and yeah, so as an external app, I'm definitely not using it in my validation rules, right? Like that's possibly, is that right? Like I can't use that in my validation rules.
Yeah, it's
Like
right at the moment.
I can't have like if I'm a third party app and says only allow people to publish blogs if they have an income of $1 million or more. I can't use that as a valid. I don't know why you don't want to do that, but let's say you do. I can't use that as a validation rule because not everyone will have access to all the other DNAs, and so I can only. The only bridging I can do is to pull in that information. Like if I'm just querying, like if I'm another user within that app and I want to know what Postby's income is for whatever reason, I can bridge that information. I can pull in that information, but I can't run a validation with it.
Yeah, this is all just hypothetical guessing, really. We don't know what's going to be possible with the new version.
Why though? I think we do. Like,
no, we don't, because it depends on, like, if we can't do cross DNA validations in some sense, then probably HoloREA is going to have to be deployed as a single DNA multiple-somes for the most part, which is a bit lame, but it might just be the way we have to work with it for the moment.
Yeah, that is very lame. Like that just. But
yeah,
how are you doing it right now? Like right now, are you writing validation rules with?
No, I'm not. And like right now, there's a couple of validations, but they're all local to the records that are being written. But we have some really, there's ones like you can't delete a commitment if the process that it's committed to has any events that have been created. So that's like jumping between planning and observation and between modules. So it's entirely possible that we can't do that kind of validation unless they're all in the same DNA.
Yeah, I would
but
imagine that you can't.
There might be creative ways out, because there's things like the new joining proofs that are coming when people enter networks. And Guillaume and I have talked about patterns before where like to bring in new data into a network and validate that someone can come in, there might be ways to do it where they submit the joining proof, and included with the joining proof is not just their record of all of the reputational data that they need to enter, but also capability tokens that point into the DNAs of all the people that have attested these things, so that then the person who's receiving the joining proof can go and actually reach out to the other counterparties and say, did this occur?
So you can only join my blogging DNA if you have $1 million, and then once you're in, you're in.
And then so then I join the blogging DNA and I bring with it, these are all my bank statements and the transactions I've made, and here's all the people's who I made the transactions with. And then as you join, the network goes and fetches all those transactions from those people and checks. But it still implies that there's some trust in those people to begin with, right? Or else you could have invented all those people.
Yeah, I don't deny like bridging requires that trust in who you're bridging into. And I actually think like that's the point. Like don't trust a community. Like you can't, like trust is not like implied. Like you have to, trust is not automatic, right? Like you have to gauge that yourself. So I actually think like that should be part of bridging. Like, yes, there is vulnerability. You are trusting someone else, and that should be a human decision. But I think the risk is just you might trust an entire community, and then there is one bad actor, and that other community actually is raising warrants and has identified someone as a bad actor, but you don't know about it. And so that, just the mechanism for you to for that to be raised to you. And so my thinking, like over the last maybe just the last couple of weeks, I've now been thinking about bridging not as like a yes or no, but what is the strength of your bridge? Like if you're bridging into a DNA where you have 2 or more agents that are bridging into it, like that have the shared DNA, then I think it's a somewhat strong bridge. But if there's just one person who's bridging into that DNA, then I think that starts getting a little weaker. And I think the quality of that bridge starts to matter. Or let's say, like, there should be a conversation on how do you build strong bridges, like a good set of standards, or processes around building good bridges.
Also, how does it relate back to biological systems? Because I know Holochain kind of came from the view that cells don't know, they just join other cells and they have their specialities and they don't have an overall picture of how everything's working, but they somehow still put it all together and still manage it. So if you're going to randomly trust different networks, where does that trust come from? Or is there a way of flagging networks based on how close you're already related to them? Something like that. So if you've already got like a dozen friends that already use a network, then it's going to be high trust. If you join a network, you've only got one. No, you don't know anyone. You can't validate what's going on.
I guess the equivalent is, if I don't know, I'm thinking on the fly here. I guess the equivalent is if I see a bunch of people getting sick and their immune systems are raising warrants. For me, I start, if I trust Sam enough, like he's not a hypochondriac, maybe there is something real to this. Like maybe COVID is real. And so then I start bridging into you. Sorry to get COVID into this, but I guess that could be an example. Like, whereas I think some people may not trust you and therefore not believe that there is a disease or whatever.
Yeah, and then what? How do you know something's not a cancer? To use the biological mechanism.
As in someone
like cancer exists.
I actually think there's a very tangible thing. Like cancer, for example, is a fork in the DNA, and so like the equivalent in Holochain is literally someone who's forked their DNA and continues to operate within that membrane. And I think what Art definitely mentioned was don't rely on warrants bleeding across DNAs from HoloCore. And I actually think I don't think that's what HoloCore should do. But there could be some external mechanism where, if you've got multiple people bridging across DNAs, then, if one of them notices something's wrong with the bridge, they almost escalate it to other people who are bridging. So let's say there's network A and network B, and there's only 2 agents who have both and are bridging between the 2. And so let's say, I'm in network B and I want to pull in information from network A from one agent, but agent 2 says to me, like, be careful because agent 1 has several warrants raised against them in network A. And so that, the information that they're bringing isn't valid. So within network B, I need to have some kind of escalation mechanism where agent 2 says there's something fishy about agent 1. And so if I actually have multiple agents bridging, then there is some kind of sense making to that information. But anyway, I think the point is, I don't think this is HoloCore's job. I think this is our job. This is what some kind of, and I actually think there isn't an absolute answer. Like each app might want to figure that out themselves. Like maybe the highest reputation people within their app, when they escalate this, we should listen to it, but not people at the fridge. Sorry.
Yeah, just that makes. Sorry, Sam, go on.
No, you go.
I was looking at Stack Overflow because I think that's got a lot of good things about kind of, we're all developers, right? So we probably know what Stack Overflow is, but just for people on the call for watching it, it's a sort of question answer thing for developers, and it feels very like there's no rules around who controls it. Basically, the more you use it, the more points you get and the more control you get. And I noticed that the other day they had an election to see who should be the sort of like 3 top moderators across the whole thing. And I thought that was pretty interesting that whoever's built it, they've just gone, here you go, just go for your lives, have your own elections, vote for each other. So yeah, as like an ungoverned or self-governing space, I thought that was quite an interesting model that they're doing.
That also has an aspect of sort of bridging where you have multiple domains. Like there's, you know, the coding, there's like server fault, I forget, there's like a sysadmin, there's like straight programming, there's like movies, there's world building, there's
Physics
like
one, yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I
I
think
asked the question on.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say I asked a question on the physics one, and someone gave me an answer, and I was like, "How do I test photons traveling across the universe at the speed of light?" Because with code, you can go, "Yeah, I'll copy and paste that into my solution. I can validate that," but I've got no way of testing whether that's true or not.
Oh, the validity of their answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I think that you might be able to rely, well, like on the person's score, but then also potentially, like you can look at their activity across domains. There's sort of that translation bridging thing where I'm like, well, this person seems like they're a reputable programmer, so maybe that means they're good at physics too. I don't know. It could or it could not. There's like some kind of interesting translation there across subdomains.
They may not know anything about physics, but at least they're a trustworthy actor.
Yeah.
You know, they've got a score of 20,000 on Stack Overflow. They might have a score of 1 on Physics Overflow.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's not just their 1. They're not an equivalent of someone that's just joined. They've got like a trust that on the overall scale of things.
Yeah.
Must be you at a point.
I don't know if Stack Overflow does that, but you could potentially.
Just to bring it back to what Sid was saying, it's kind of funny to me because really what you're talking about is building an application level warrant system on top of the native warrant system, right, to help propagate it between networks, which, you know, you might well be right. It might well be an application level thing that has nuance and is specific to each use case and is thus something that we have to deal with and implement ourselves. But it's also kind of interesting watching core patterns bubble up into the application layer and be replicated.
But I think about like core as the nation state, and there's some things that the nation state should not do because there's a certain amount of universality to their applications. So this is actually, I think, community level, more nuanced stuff. I think like some of this lands in the shared infrastructure space. So with the reputation vault, like I think they should play a key role in it. Like, for example, if you're bridging reputation from network A, and if there is the situation where, you know, an agent has several warrants against them and some of the other like the reputation vault coordinates across all the agents that are bridging, and that can actually throw up an indicator of like how good this bridge is. So yeah, I think that could be a shared infrastructure scope. Like that's like the scope of the shared infrastructure people. Because I know like apps won't or communities won't be vested in this problem as much. Like I don't think they're geared to be thinking about this. And Core's not doing it. I think it's like the shared infrastructure people. And because I think this is very, like bridging is very important to what we want to do. And so that's a problem we will have to solve. And so maybe give like templates to people, like how critical is this data? You know, and they get a sliding scale of sorts or some simple templates that they can play with to ascertain the quality of the bridge. But yeah, I think the initial phases anyway could roll out with without some of those nuances, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we could, for our own experimentation, you could just implement the hierarchical command and control version of that, where the trusted group in the collective gets to just arbitrarily kick people out with warrants if they don't like them, and then it becomes the human thing of figuring out what your reputation vault looks like and what's the justification that person wasn't welcome, kind of thing.
Or like even more crude, like you don't like there isn't an escalation of warrants in another DNA, and all we tell people is listen, just bridge into like non-critical data, and or like understand that this is a vulnerability and stop, like go really slow with it initially. But that could be like the like version 1.0.
You'd like to see it with it sort of flies in the face of Ostrom's graduated sanctions, so I'd like to see like a graduated version of something like that sort of restricts permissions and gives people opportunities to rectify behavior and all that kind of thing.
So you mean like starting off with a crude version of escalation?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. These are all ideologically problematic hypotheticals, I think.
But anyway, that was for me a good conversation. I think I'd love to build it over the next few weeks. Just looking at the time, we've got about 7 minutes to go. Possibly, do you feel like there's any more to add for REA?
Like I did have a reflection, but it was very technical, and I kind of wanted to ask Kamal if he feels like there's anything he wants to get out of this call in particular, seeing as he came all the way in his crazy time of day.
Thanks all. Yeah, it's just crazy. A lot of work going on right now, so just busy. Yeah, I was going to give an update about Hilo. I don't think I have much else. We've been launching a Hilo site for circular economy. That seems to be getting some interest and potential, and so hoping to plug in Basyn and the groups I'm working into that.
Is this a self-hosted one?
No, not yet. This is just we're calling it an alpha and a beta, and then if it is something we want to self-host, we could. But yeah, I was, I'm still checking in on Hilo. Like, where does that fit into people's pictures? And then there's some Google guys who have gotten in on the impact bioenergy side, and so they're kind of they're coming into the picture. So that's adding an element. I was hoping to beat them to the punch, but we did for a little while. But now I think they're getting their little grubby hands in all this. So, but we supposedly are going to be collaborating with them. So that's happening. Yeah, so the plot thickens. But they're supposedly going to be working at the soil science level, so NPK, which is kind of where we've been chatting a little bit, you and I possibly. Hopefully that doesn't get in the way of what we're trying to do. And I've been being very clear, like, please let's make sure we're sharing data here. And the company we're working with is open with that. So that's happening.
Exciting.
Yeah, it looks like we're in the right place. If Google's your competition in something, it's probably a good thing. Well, maybe it depends. But yeah, I don't have much else besides what's next, It's more questions than answers, I think.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. Any thoughts on a slightly longer time frame, or that's still as hazy? 6 months, 9 months, like something that's come up for Basyn, like overall at a vision level for you? Since it's a recap session, we're running through some of that.
Yeah, I think what we've been talking about is a need for the interchange of buying product at a pre-sale, and paying your bill is still a need. There seems to be this need for this back-end logistics stuff, and we're looking at, do we just do an MVP on Shopify, and just get things moving? Because now they're getting past a scale where things are getting messy. They were only dealing with like 10 to 20 orders. Now they're getting above that. And so logistics is kind of key. So one suggestion was, what if we just go with Shopify and just get it moving, learn from it, and then hopefully build a back end, on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think feel like it's a familiar problem for many projects right now. Are there some aspects or elements that need to get rolling because they may not be as critically linked to agent-centric architecture? Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Michael,
They're basically, and just wanted to mention, they're letting us into all the processes. We had to sign an NDA as well. So we're in all of the guts of it now, and obviously my interest is to bring HoloChain into this, and do all the things we're hoping it can do. But yeah, I don't know if that brings anything up for you, possibly. As I know that.
Really just curious if your front-end development timeline is going to shift much with that, because I've been thinking about syncing up with Feli and trying to coordinate better.
Yeah, I think when we were talking about React, it was a little easier. Now I think there's more conversations about Vue and other things. So that definitely, we would need a developer to do that stuff.
How are you feeling about the prototyping you've done so far, the React stuff?
A little messy, but usable. And I think what happened was, when we started to talk about this need for a shared marketplace, that's when Hilo, I think, became a little more like, okay, this is a shared UI framework we could all use instead of us starting new. I think that's why I've been centering Hilo a little more, is because it's a shared, system. So I think I've been starting to get the Hilo train moving again, or whatever, or be part of the train. It seems like there's definitely some moving pieces there. So I'm still just learning.
Cool.
But it's a little bit of a shift for sure. And then this last piece, C-Chair is also looking at Hilo as a pattern as well. So we're trying to integrate, at least on that end, so that we're thinking about similar patterns. So once we do get the train moving, we're plugging into a lot of work that's already being done. That's our strategy. And I don't know if that's the right strategy or not, and I hope to hear from you guys as well.
Yeah, before you came on the call, I was talking a little bit about just proofing some of the tooling that I'm trying to build in the pursuit of platform, or the absence of vendor lock-in. So yeah, and I've been kind of hitting up against just the learning curve of Svelte and learning another new front-end framework. So I probably want to finish that thought in the next week or two and just work through getting an integration between those components and a React app and see if it all works as I'd expect, or if it's like crazy complicated instead. But yeah, I've been thinking more about Hilo as well, and like how to align what I'm doing with their style guide so that it all can kind of work together and we can just start stitching stuff. Yeah. But I'm figuring things out. It's an exploration at the moment rather than an implementation.
And what's Hilo built in right now?
React, the UI.
Oh, it is React.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. That's interesting. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Michael, would you like to share some updates?
Still learning stuff. HoloChain, Rust. That's mostly going on.
Yeah. And I know we've spoken about it, but anything you're leaning towards that could be helpful for some of the others also listening in?
Do you mean like focus-wise, or?
Yeah. I guess you're exploring REA, some of the reputation stuff with Sacred Capital, and yeah, anything else? Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah. Let's see. No, mostly I think that's it on the front. Yeah, like still learning about like semantic web stuff. There's a lot of like new things for me to choose right now, and basically what you said, REA, and now learning about the reputation stuff, going through Sacred Capital's documents. Yeah.
Nice.
Have you thought about the reputation stuff you're doing in Hilo? Is that?
We have, like, Posby and I have been chatting about it because for like some of the first implementations of reputations and reputation and what we're calling neighborhoods, like, it'll be nice to just have basic conversational tools. So I'm very vested in a fork of Hilo that's just people and communities like building some kind of conversation through like basic social media tools, and then plugging in like reputational libraries. So instead of like having to buy into Hilo's reputational tools, like they can just plug in whatever reputation tools modules we build. So yeah, one conversation we've been having is just a simple fork of Hilo for this purpose. So that could intersect with you guys. I don't know. I guess possibly would know that, would have a better sense on whether there's intersections. But maybe we just create a little subgroup that's focused on Hilo and HoloChain ourselves, unless and just start doing things or coordinating our efforts better.
Yeah, I've been going to Hilo events, and there's a lot of
Really?
interest.
There's Hilo events?
Oh, there is so many Hilo events. There's a
Really?
whole world. I'm now learning there's a lot of people involved.
Where is this? What is this?
It's called Mycelium, of course. Mycelium, which is connected to Terran Collective.
Yeah.
And they're partnering with the Bio something organization, the soil community.
Yeah.
And focusing on food systems. So I think again it overlays a lot of the stuff we're doing. Whether I like it or not, I do like Hilo, but it just keeps pointing me back into this world. And what I'm noticing is I think I'm seeing a little bit of a silo between Hilo and Holo, or at least the HoloChain community, and so I'm wanting to bridge them.
Yeah, but I feel like Posby is the central figure to some of that on Holo. I don't know, or at least for me, he is. Like I don't know. I feel like some of those efforts can be coordinated by Posby.
And also, I
Well,
think
I can do
Posse
it.
has a lot of stuff on Posse's plate.
Yeah, your thoughts, possibly, like where Hilo fits into all of these priorities? Like, should we be getting a more coordinated effort within Holo?
I mean, I would like to, but I've tried at that, and they're also busy doing their own thing, Terrans. So they're kind of keen to just keep running and not spend too much time getting distracted by potential opportunities. I think is kind of the feeling I get anyway.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, I think we just spin it off and start doing some stuff, like preparing Hilo for a more holochain approach to things.
Right.
Like, and so we could start plugging REA commerce into it, reputation libraries into it, and from the REA side, it could be the Basyn that's, I don't know, that's creating the first rollout.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking if I do keep going down this felt route, it might just be nice time to be able to do a design audit of Hilo's stuff anyway, and just kind of bring stuff that is working well and looks good into the framework and leave some of the other stuff out and redo some things. I don't know.
How does Svelte tie in with this?
Because we wanted to have a front-end framework that wouldn't tie developers into a particular platform. So
Also,
not forcing
okay,
people to
I
use
get it.
React.
That makes sense. Sorry, yeah, that was obvious.
Yeah, but I can see some things like those kind of main forms in the platform would be the significant rebuilds, and just getting those forms authored to a place where they speak REA and the data that comes out of them rather than Hilo's own little format. That would be really worthwhile doing and set the foundation, even if that app never sees the light of day, because it tells others how to translate those concepts, and it it also just creates some foundation that might be useful to swap in later.
And Hilo is on HoloChain. It's called Communities, at least from what I've seen so far.
It may get released with the HAP release that's coming in the next month or two. So hopefully we see it soon.
Oh, is it? Wow, that's nice.
I think so. I think kind of all that stuff, like all the Holo hosting apps and chat, and it's all under the same banner of that suite of apps, I think.
Yeah, but I didn't realize. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
It's on Holo Suite.
Holo Suite. Yeah, that's what we're calling it, is it?
Well, I will put my hat in to say I'm interested in helping Hilo and Holo get connected, but I would love help with that. I have a day gig, so I have to balance my time.
Yeah.
But if there's an interest, I'm happy to help. So
hit me up if you need support on any of that. Like if stuff comes your way that you need help moving with, and I'll do the same, and maybe we can just run that way.
Good.
But it seems like there is no core Holo core's interest and like energy on this right now, right? Like it's just us. Yeah.
Who did all the community stuff? Who did that stuff already? It must be.
As in the apps or the community building in HoloChain?
Community building in HoloChain.
I mean, mostly Eric and Carolyn, I think.
Oh no,
Eric
I think he means the community app on HoloChain.
Yeah.
Oh right, yeah. Like because it's still in, like it's gone back into the private part of the organization, so I don't know who's working on it now. But I think it was like the names I saw in the history of the older one that I have seen. It was all kind of random HoloChain core devs. Like I think I saw David Meister's name and Willem Olding and people in there.
Okay. It might be above our pay grade, is what you're saying.
Yeah, maybe. For the next few weeks, anyway.
Okay.
Until they all land.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you. That's very helpful.
I'm also definitely interested in this high-low hollow intersection. Been like following along little bits, and I know there's at least one person in dev camp who has been working with high-low, or like at least talking to Taryn a lot, and then is learning hollow chain, hoping to, I think, kind of help with this intersection. So yeah, I'm also interested, but at this point still mostly learning stuff, but not, still low on the pay grade.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, these are all really great seeds. Thank you. I will. I'll do what I can to keep it moving.
Awesome.
And those mycelia calls, are those like pretty often or weekly?
Yeah, every 2 weeks.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
let me share the site with you. You can actually watch some of the videos. Mycelia.earth.
Thanks.
Yeah, they go into like how Hilo and HoloChain came together, and now they're building them separately, and they go into all that stuff.
That's interesting about the communities app. Like I didn't know that that was also related. I'd seen like the Hilo bases on GitHub, but it seemed like they were pretty separate or something. I don't know, like the coupling. Yeah, I don't know. The connection wasn't that strong between the centralized backend and the potential holochain backend. But maybe that's not the case. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to learn.
I should check it out myself, but possibly like for the communities build, how modular is it, or is it still pretty monolithic? It's not.
No, it's a monolith. Yeah, at least the one I've seen.
So that potential of spinning out a few things in DNAs, like I'm just thinking like plugging in some of the reputation modules as separate DNAs would be some amount of work, or at least not till RSM rolls out and we get some more clarity on it.
Probably, yeah. But like, you don't have to actually plug them into the core app is the thing. Like you can just have a likes DNA sitting in your manifest. It doesn't actually link through HoloChain, but you're just linking to HoloChain links kind of thing.
Yeah.
HoloChain IDs. Yeah, so that's all possible. But yeah, as far as I know, the communities, like the HAP backend piece of the communities app is just a thing that acts like a Facebook wall to store post content and pull it back out. It doesn't do much else other than like the public network community kind of hierarchy that Hilo has.
But we have the ability to go into the front end and start linking it to our modules, right?
Yeah.
Good. I mean, I don't see why we wouldn't be able to. Okay. Anyway, that's good to know. Yeah, I think if everyone's feeling full, we could close this out here, unless someone has something additional to share. Oh, very cool. Yeah, with that, thank you. Thanks for joining, guys.
Thanks all.
Thanks for the chat.